Alright, so moving on in geometry, this is section 2 of chapter 9. We're going to be looking at reflections, and we're continuing with this transformation chapter. Uh, we've talked about translations already. Now we're going to move on to reflections. First thing is, what is a reflection? And a reflection is basically the flipping of a pre-image. So remember, your pre-image is your first one, then your image is your final image. And if you flip it over something, okay, this transformation is also known as a twin transformation. Basically means that the shape doesn't change. So uh, it's like our translations, where you don't have any change in the shape of the object. It's still the same. It's a congruent shape, but it's just flipped over something. Okay. Every reflection has what is called a line of reflection. Okay, so it's not like a line of symmetry where it goes through something. A line of symmetry usually is inside the object. A reflection line is on the outside. So as you see here, these two blue objects are being reflected around that orange line. And one thing that's true about this is that the distance from the point on the pre-image to the reflection line is always going to be congruent to the image to the reflection line. So those should be the exact same distance. These should be the exact same distance. These should be the exact same distance. Okay. And actually it's true for any point. So if I were to pick this point down here, the distance of all of these points, all the corners of our object to that point, should be equal to the distances from those points down. Okay, so that should also be true. So every reflection has some sort of line of reflection in which it's revolved around. Usually when we're dealing with a coordinate plane on this, it's the x-axis, the y-axis, or a line somewhere else on the axis. Okay, so take a second. I want you to think of words, capital words, that have some sort, that can be reflected in some way, kind of like having a line of symmetry on it. Okay. Hopefully you figured out one or two. Here's a list of some of them that could be. Okay. So like the first one's through the middle, going horizontally. Okay. I, you could do it either way. A is there. O is there. Wow and mom. Okay, so those are kind of more symmetry lines, but it's the same basic thing. So you have some sort of reflection. Okay, so given the following points, we want to reflect this around the x-axis. So we want to reflect it around the x-axis, which, remember, the x-axis is our horizontal. So that means that the distance from this point to the x-axis has to be equal to the other side. Okay, so it has to be equal to the other side. So I went down 2 units. That means I should go across 2 more units. So that's where my 1 point should be. This one up here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that means I should go down 5. 5. Okay. This one is 4. I should go down 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And now there, that green image would be my image. Okay. And that is it being reflected around the x-axis. Now, what are the coordinates of them? And if you notice with all those coordinates, okay, the x values didn't change. The only thing that changed were the y values. So the y values changed. And how did they change? They just changed sign. They went from positive to negative or negative to positive. Okay. Anytime you're reflecting around the x-axis, okay, if you reflect around the x-axis, what ends up happening is that you're just multiplying the y-coordinate by -1. So if you have the point xy, okay, that means its transformation would end up being just x, comma, -y. Okay, so it's the y value that changes. Now, if you're reflecting around the y-axis, that means that the x is going to be the one that changes. So it's going to be, if you originally have xy, reflected around the y-axis would be a negative x, comma y. And that would be your new point. Okay. So when you're reflecting around the x-axis, the y is changed. When you're reflecting around the y-axis, the x is changed. And the easiest way to really see this and understand it is to graph it. And when you see the points, like in our previous example, you could see that the points changing. Okay, so if I had the point, let's say 3, 4, and I want to reflect it around the y-axis, it would end up being -3, +4. Okay. All right, so here are some questions. I want you to think for a second and think of the answers. Try to get it. Some of them are from this section, some of them are from last section. Okay, so take a second to think about these are. Okay. Okay, so these are just some basic questions that you want to remember with transformations. And yeah. Okay, so here's your homework from this section. 408 numbers 1 through 15. Make sure you work on that. And next we will be moving on to our next transformation.